Okay, are we recording? Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's our first ever statewide advocacy and action night. I'm excited you're here. All right, so just a little bit about Easter Seals Midwest. I'm sure most of you know, but in case we've got newcomers, we support about 4,600 individuals with developmental disabilities and their families across the state of Missouri, parts of Kansas, and parts of Illinois. We have 4 program areas: community living, employment, early childhood education, and autism services. And all of those are geared towards empowering individuals to live as productive and independently in the community as possible. We also have 5 different offices that are joining us tonight. So we're going to do a quick roll call. Can I hear from Kansas City? Are you here? They're running. Okay, so Kansas City is almost unmuted.
We're here. We were muted.
And the McKelvey office, the North office. We're here. Hi, Suzanne. And let's see, we have Joplin. Hello, Joplin. And who am I missing? St. Charles.
St. Charles, exactly. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Sarah. It's good to hear your voice. So we've got 5 different offices participating, and tonight we're going to be engaging with our legislators, learning about advocacy and decision making, and how to amplify our voices to truly make a change. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look up their legislators. We'll be giving them a call later. But right now, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you Pamela Merritt. She's a grassroots organizer and Missouri political advocate that's here to share her experiences and knowledge about advocacy and engaging with our decision makers. So please welcome.
No, I need them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. So I'm not going to stand behind this thing the entire time. But if people could mute your phones or mute your lines, that'd be great because we're getting some background feedback. And okay, so I'm Pamela Merritt, and full disclosure, I am a lobbyist within the state. I've also lobbied federally. I've been working in Missouri politics for over a decade. So I have a lot of experience talking to local politicians and also state politicians, statewide politicians, and then some of the folks we have in DC. What we're going to go through tonight is going to be the basics. Some of this, if you've ever done any advocacy, and by show of hands, how many people have done advocacy, like talk to their state rep or their state senator? Gotcha. Okay. So this is going to be a little bit of a refresher for you, but for other folks, this might seem new. And then once I'm done with the basic presentation, there'll be time for Q&A before we dive into calling the legislators. Did somebody just join the call? I know I heard a bleep, a bloop. I'll just let it pass. Okay. So I have been literally raised within some form or another form of what is now Easter Seals Midwest. My older brother, who is 47, started out at what was then Judavine, and he was 7 years old. So 40 years ago, my brother was going to school in South County, and we went with him a lot. So my sister and I, who are younger than him, have literally been a part of this process and this, or what is now this organization, the majority of our lives. My first lobby experience was when I was around 6 or 7 years old, and it was actually what was then called INSAC, but it was a parent advocacy group, and there was a bill that was stalled in the Missouri House because the chair didn't understand the difference between Down syndrome and autism. And so a bunch of parents, my mother included, hopped into their Oldsmobiles and drove to Jefferson City And the lure for us kids was that we were going to get McDonald's. But by the time we got there, we didn't have time to eat lunch, so we kind of hurried into hearing room 1, which if you do get down to the state capitol, there's like maybe 8 or 9. There's several hearing rooms, and they were already taking testimony. My brother chose that moment to make his outrage over not getting French fries heard, and my mother was going through the steps that she had learned to help him calm down and get back focused, because he was very frustrated and very upset. So the chair got irate because my brother was twirling and saying his favorite letter B over and over again, and started banging his gavel and saying, "What is that?" And my mother turned to him and said, "This is my son, and he's autistic. This is autism in our house. And this is why we're here, because you didn't know what this is. And we want to make sure that before you vote not to fund programs that particularly service people with autism, that you understand and that you hear from people who need these programs, so that you can look us in the face." And that was not normal, but they went ahead and let my mother testify. And they ultimately were victorious. It was one of the big wins among many big wins that took place in the 80s, where people were able to get special services, special education for people with autism. I'm 45, so I'm old enough to remember when they did not actually have separate education programs for people with autism, when you could not get separate services funded. So all of the rights that we currently enjoy, including the Americans for Disabilities Act, were won through public advocacy and people taking action. So what we are doing and what we're going to do is continue this spirit, and I'm going to try to make this seem comfortable and not as intimidating as it sometimes does. So I have a PowerPoint. It is not fancy because I am not a fancy PowerPoint maker, but it is a PowerPoint that I'm going to walk through. All right, everybody ready?
Ready.
Awesome. Everybody awake?
Awake.
Fantastic. Okay. Where am I supposed to point this thing? Oh. Now it's not wanting to work. He said I can't hit the up or down. Hold, please.
I always say that.
Of course. I worked 5-10 minutes ago.
That's the way it is. That always is.
Hold, please. I'm scared to just start pushing buttons like I do when I'm home, because that would be a disaster waiting to happen.
It might be.
It might have gone to sleep.
I'm just glad somebody other than me has these technical issues.
I have tons. I also work with a MacBook, and nothing wants to work with it. So I always have technical problems.
How old is your brother in comparison to you? Is she younger than you?
We are literally back to back to back. So my brother is the oldest. He's 47. My sister is 46, and I'm 45. Mom was busy. She had 3 kids in diapers, and trust me, I heard that a lot. Okay. Yay. All right. Advocacy Matters. So why on earth would anybody take the time to actually pick up the phone and call their state rep or their state senator or even your council person? And why would you want to go meet with them either in their district or in Jefferson City? Because it matters. Elected officials rely upon constituents and the public to explain the real world consequences of policy and budget. Their phones ring all the time. So I like to tell people that if you're not in contact with your state legislator, then somebody else is telling them what matters to them. And the balance is that sometimes they agree with us and sometimes they don't. But we are the employers and they work for us. So when we contact them, we're actually providing a service. You are helping them better understand. Very few people in Jefferson City are experts in disability rights or advocacy the way a parent or somebody with a disability, or myself as a sibling guardian would be able to advocate. So you're helping them out. Our system of government thrives when people take an active role. I'm a huge government nerd. Obviously, I work in politics. The system does not work without people being active and giving input. I know that there's a lot of talk, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, about politics being dysfunctional. It's a wonderful, chaos. It always has been. It always will be. But the system actually requires that citizens, and we are all there, interact with public officials and hold them accountable, but also let them know when they've done something right. So this is our responsibility. We're in a contract. This is our part of it. Elected officials must be held accountable to the people in the community they serve. This is the single most important thing. And please note, on a lot of issues, other people are holding them accountable. So for everything that you want to pick up the phone and say, great job, there is somebody who's going to pick up the phone and say, what were you doing? You don't want that to be the only phone call that they get. So when somebody does something awesome, let them know. They actually don't get a lot of those phone calls, so they actually remember them. If they do something that you weren't happy with, probably not a good idea to blow up their phone the first time, but definitely let them know, I'd like to talk to you. I'm not quite sure why you did this, why you made this vote, or why you said that statement about disabilities or about Medicaid or anything. It's helpful, and very often what you'll find is that people in public office will say, well, my constituents are saying. And that's true, but that's just the constituents who are calling. So if you're not calling, then they're going to be quoting constituents and doing what the constituents who are calling say. You want them to be able to say, my constituents are saying that these cuts are going to hurt their families. You want them to have that weighing on their hearts. These are just regular people who have decided to serve the public in public office. Some of them are great. Some of them I don't really care for, but they're human, and all of them are worthy of being given the opportunity to make the right decision. And then people with disabilities are particularly vulnerable to changes in policy and funding. Again, this is a nonpartisan statement. The reality is that we can't individually pull together what Easter Seals has pulled together. I don't know anybody who can make that happen on their budget, and I certainly can't. So what we do is we have this collective pool that benefits our community, that funds these programs so that folks like my brother are able to have a great quality of life, but also so that people like my brother are able to participate in the community. And he's awesome. So the community needs him, and we're making that possible. So there's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. We aren't begging for services. We are telling the government that this is good public policy and worthy of being funded. Any questions so far? Seeing none. All right, so you should have already looked up your state legislators. There's the House and there's the Senate. I believe we're calling the House tonight. You'll get to know, I also recommend that you get to know your local representatives. So depending on where you live, that's either, I live in the city of St. Louis, so that's an alderperson, or it might be your city council person. This is not a bad idea. And the number one reason why you should get to know them is, first of all, they're good for a cup of coffee. They are far more likely to have time to meet with you. They love to meet with constituents. They're usually slightly newer to politics. But the big reason is that these people are going to be your state rep or your state senator someday. That's just how it works. So the odds that somebody who is in local government will run for state government are very high. And that's where most of them funnel in. Being able to pick up the phone and have a relationship with them is huge. And I've personally done this so that somebody who was on a political committee 12 years ago is now in elected office, and they know me, and I've got their cell phone. So when something pops up, I'm like, hey, let me know if I need to come down to Jefferson City and testify for that. That's not just because I do this for a living. That's just good relationship building. And it also kind of cuts down on the fear I don't know about y'all, I'm not going to project, but I get nervous when I walk into Senator McCaskill's office or whatever, and it's just an intimidating space. It's supposed to be. It's designed to be. And when you've had coffee with them at a local coffee shop, they're far less intimidating when they're in the Missouri House. And then you want to know when they're in session and when they're not. We know now that we're going to be calling because there's active legislation, but you do want to know that January through May is when the Missouri legislature is in session. They're working for you 12 months every day. So when they're not in session, June, they're kind of on vacation, but July, August, September, they are in district and they are available for you to meet with them. So you're far more likely to actually get a lunch or an extended meeting with somebody out of session. Now they're driving back. They literally are in Jefferson City Monday through Thursday, and then they drive back to their home districts. So if you want to set up a meeting just to get to know your state rep or your state senator, you are really trying to set up a meeting for Thursday night, Friday, which is brutal. I've never done it, Saturday or Sunday. So this just kind of helps you gauge whether they're blowing you off or whether they really legitimately can't meet with you. If it's Monday through Thursday, January through May, they're really not in town. But they are in Jefferson City, and there's not a heck of a lot going on there. So if you do get an opportunity to go down there, you can always take them or make them take you to lunch. How to advocate for an issue. So this is where we get into the fun stuff. So there's different types of advocacy. There's education, there's persuasion, and there's pressure. So very often as civilian advocates, as I like to call it, we're doing education, we're doing persuasion. Pressure is difficult and often not at this level. That might be something that a professional lobbyist does or that a professional advocacy group goes in. Persuasion is like a negotiation, and if you've ever bought a car, that's not the most fun thing you've ever done, but it's also a very powerful thing. It can make the difference between a $300 a month payment and a $500 a month payment. So the type of advocacy that you're most likely going to start off doing is education. You have to know that there's probably less than 5 members of the Missouri legislature who personally have a loved one who is on the autism spectrum or has a developmental disability. That becomes a bigger number when you talk about disability in general, but their personal experience isn't your experience. And it might not be the average experience. If they come from a place of wealth, or if they come from a huge family where everybody can take turns watching somebody, you want to tell your personal story. And so you want to educate them about what it's like in your world. What services are you using? How have those services benefited your life? Nobody expects you to be an expert on Medicaid, although many people are, just because they have to navigate the system. Nobody expects you to be an expert on government and know the difference between an amendment and a bill. What they do know is that you're an expert on you. You're an expert on your life. You're an expert on your experience, and you're an expert on the services that you receive from Easter Seals. That is why you're going down there to talk to them and educate them. Persuasion is when you get into the sausage making. I'm sure you've heard that watching legislation get made is like watching sausage get made. It's pretty gross. People tend to be exhausted and flippant, dismissive, and that's actually when it's more important that you be down there. Because when it's April and they're getting into the real nitty-gritty of budget work and the real nitty-gritty of what they need to do, they are tired of each other. They're tired of the work. They're tired of being away from home. They're tired of everything. And at 11 o'clock at night, people make really bad decisions when they're tired and they're homesick. So you want to be the person who was in there saying, I know you've probably heard a lot of people say that this will be a benefit to taxpayers or something like that. I just want to remind you, I know I met with you before, of our story. I just want to make sure that you are thinking about that when you're making this decision. I've had some amazing, impactful conversations with state reps in April, sometimes at 11 o'clock at night, but it doesn't have to be. But when, with their legislative assistants, and we'll get into that in a minute, but when they're in that point where they're making decisions and they can see the end of the tunnel and it's almost May and then they get to go home and be with their families, you do want to remind them that the decisions they make today will impact people's lives going forward and that nobody's going to fix it. I often say just that. What you do, you cannot assume somebody's going to fix. In my experience, the Missouri General Assembly hasn't fixed anything in a long time. They have passed some really wonky stuff, but once it's done, because we have term limits, the people who pass it won't even be in office when it becomes actual policy. So don't ever let somebody say, well, it's not that big a deal. If it's bad, they'll fix it. Fixing a bad bill is hard to do. Tweaking it before it's passed, much easier. And passing good legislation is the right thing to do. It's irresponsible to do anything else. So those are the three: education, persuasion, and pressure. Research is something that you're lucky, because Easter Seals does a lot of research. They know how policy is going to impact their ability to give services. Some of the stuff I work on, I have to go in and do all this research. They've got awesome, colorful one-sheets that help you understand why they have a position on managed care or why they have a position on any other piece of policy. But you do want to try to understand your legislator's history. So you can actually ask them, do you have anybody in your life who is on the autism spectrum? Have you anybody in your life who has a developmental disability? You'd be surprised how many people will say, no, but my frat brother's son has autism or something like that. That's a good hook, because that means that this is not something they're totally unfamiliar with, but that also might mean that you need to make sure that they understand that that experience might not be the common experience. You want to know their background. This is not hard to do, because they actually typically will list it off when they're running for office. So you can just Google a legislator's name, and if you see their website, it should say, that he's a father of four, or, that he enjoys going to fish fries during Lent. Those are the little things that you can connect with. I actually had one of the best conversations with a political opponent, because we're both hockey fans. I'm a huge Blues fan, and he's a huge Blues fan. We talked for 45 minutes about hockey, and then we talked about the bill I wanted to talk about. And he was in a much better mood after we had talked hockey. So it can be a good thing to know. You also want to know the opposition's message. It might seem bizarre, but for every position, there is an opposition. For funding for programs for developmental disabilities, there is an opposition. There are people in very well-funded lobby groups that are going out there and meeting with people and taking them to state dinners and telling them that they will be the best person ever if they get funding cuts. There are people who do that because it's their political position. I'm not here to judge. Obviously, I feel differently. But there's some people who do that because they have a broader agenda. So I want to make it incredibly clear that for every funded program, there is an organized, well-funded opposition who is trying to cut that funding. Either they want to cut it completely or they want to move it elsewhere. So if there's $100 on the table, they're fighting for that $100, and they either want that $100 to just go back into the atmosphere or to go to different people. Those people work 12 months out of the year. They are in Jefferson City when you're not there. They don't hesitate to pick up the phone. They don't hesitate to send an email. They won't hesitate to actually yell or apply that pressure. I'm not saying yell, but definitely apply that pressure. So you have to remember that we're fighting against people who actually are articulating the opposite message. I wish it weren't true, but it's definitely a fact. And then escalation is something, again, you have to take your cue from a good resource. So Easter Seals is really here to help us with this. We want to make sure that as we escalate, that they are saying, okay, now's the time that you need to call, or now's the time that we might want to drive down there. Because they have a lobbyist on the ground, and they're meeting, again, with legislators on a regular basis. They are going to know that, Senator, whatever his name is waffling and is dodging my phone call, so it would be helpful if you called. So I would rely upon Easter Seals to be a resource for escalation, but the goal of escalation is to get a no, to get a yes, and to define whether or not our target is going to split the difference. Meaning, getting to know can be a very positive thing, because then you know whether you need to do some accountability. If somebody's just not going to do your thing, you want to identify that, because you need to know how many people are going to help us, and then you can identify who's soft, who's trying to split the difference, so that you can apply pressure there. You don't want to be calling somebody all the time if they're already a yes, because other than to say, don't mess it up. And that's a good thing to do. But if you've got somebody who's a hard no, then at a certain point, every minute you spend calling them is a minute that you're not calling somebody who's persuadable. So getting to the point where you identify whether they're persuadable is huge. And you're most likely going to be calling your actual representatives. So if they respond to your phone call and say, there is no way I am ever going to vote for this funding, then that's something you want to let Easter Seals know, so that they can say, okay, how did he say it? Or they follow up and clarify and confirm that. But when push comes down to shove, budgets and legislation pass on votes. So there's a fixed number of people in the House. There's a fixed number of people in the Senate. And the goal is to make sure that we get enough people to do the right thing so that it will pass and be a good budget. Or we get enough people to do the right thing so that it'll pass and be a good bill. It's a numbers game. Not exactly Mr. Smith goes to Washington, but it is what it is. All right, so different ways that we can advocate. We can lobby. I'm going to go ahead and make a huge pitch for lobbying. It's not something everybody can do. Not everybody can get down to Jefferson City. You can, however, try to meet with your representatives in district. They are required to meet with constituents. Sometimes they dodge that, but they are required to. If you can get to Jefferson City, it is a life-changing experience. Has anybody lobbied in Jefferson City? Okay, it's huge because you get to, it's sausage making, right? You get to see kind of how they react to what you're saying. And the first time I lobbied, as I said, I was a youngster, and I was shocked. I was like, there's folks who are yelling at each other, and it seemed chaotic. But it really did help me understand that, out of that chaos can sometimes come great things, but sometimes you're just like, how did that happen? Well, 11 o'clock at night. So lobbying is huge. I cannot stress enough how important it is to help your elected officials make decisions and to make them look you in the eye when they're doing it. I have actually seen people back off of positions because they're standing in front of somebody and that person is like, this is going to kill me, or this is going to make my life really tough. So you want, if at the very least, my parents were very old school and they're always like, well, have them look you in the eye. So I'm a big person about looking somebody in the eye and saying, okay, are you really going to do this? But I'm also a huge fan of saying, if you're going to do this, you're going to know exactly how this is going to impact my life. And then sometimes they'll do the right thing. It's definitely happened. Phone banks are huge. you might not actually get to talk to the elected official, but the person you're talking to is most likely going to be their legislative assistant. Legislative assistants know way more than the elected officials. Just a fact of life. They do. They're there and they stay there. Many of them I've known for over a decade. And the representative might come and go. They'll get voted in. They know everything. They know the secrets. They know all of the places where you can get good soda pop. So legislative assistants, if you get somebody else on the phone, don't be disappointed, because they often play the role of educating your elected official on issues. So they will come in and explain that, people with developmental disabilities can't just automatically go and work. They might need a job coach. If you tell them that, that's going to absorb in them probably a lot stronger than with the elected official. It's great if you can talk to the elected. Go ahead and make friends with the LA. And they tend to be nice people.
That LA keeps the tally.
They do. So they will also keep that tally of who has met, who's called. And when you call again, they'll tell your elected official, she's called 3 times. You want that. In district one-on-one meetings, as I said, they are required to be in district. So if I live in South St. Louis City, my representative is required to be back home. He's required to make himself available. And I am always on his phone. So, find out where they do their in-district meetings. They very often will plant themselves in one place. I know of one state senator who does like a Panera meeting where she's always at the Bread Co. And just stays there for 5 hours and people come and go. But those one-on-one meetings can be huge. They can help you, first of all, they tend to be less formal. You get to have more of a dialogue with them, and it never hurts. And then in-district group meetings, I'm actually in the process of pulling one of these together myself with my sister. My sister and I are co-guardians for my brother. So my sister and I, our brother, and then we have a huge network of friends who are deeply invested in my brother's life because I share a lot of stuff on Facebook. And they're all really, really worried about some of the things that they've heard out of Jefferson City. And so we formed a team of supporters who are willing to meet with people in district. And we call it Team Kit Kat because my brother loves Kit Kat candy bars. And Team Kit Kat is going to try to do an in-district meeting with a couple of people just to make sure that they understand what's at stake and so that they can actually articulate this message. If you've got somebody who is awesome and who is going to do the right thing, this can be a great way for you to tell them and show them that you support them. And so getting 3 or 4 people in the room can be huge. If you have somebody who needs persuasion, I can't tell you how powerful it is to sit down. I've actually seen people who've been in office for years, for 15 years, break out in a sweat because they're in a room with 20 people who are like really passionate about something. So don't be afraid to enlist people who care about this issue because they care about you and your family. Don't be afraid to enlist them in this. My friends and my family are invested in my brother's life because he's awesome and he's great, and they don't want him to leave Missouri because he can't get the services that he needs. So when I was ranting on Facebook because I was worried, they immediately were like, what can I do? How can I help? So your friends, your family, your Facebook friends, the people who are connected with you, making a very basic phone call and saying, I've met Bill Merritt and he's fantastic and I think he's a great asset to our community and I'm really worried that he might not have the services he needs. That's huge. That's awesome. And then I talked a little bit about this, but the critical role and influence of legislative assistants, they are huge, critical parts of the process. So when you bring material down, you want to make sure that you leave the material, if you're not actually leaving it with your elected official, leave it with the legislative assistant. And if you do have a dialogue going on, making a friendship, bringing them something when you visit is not a bad move. When I go down to Jefferson City, I know who my rep's LA is. I always bring her some gooey butter cake because she likes it, and it goes a long way. She has always managed to find me a meeting, so it's very helpful. So we're going to talk a little bit about crafting our story. So I've shared a little bit about our story, which is that my parents had my brother first. They knew something was wrong, but they weren't quite sure what was what. And he wasn't actually diagnosed with autism until he was about 6 or 7 years old, which was very common back then. There were not a lot of services, and so my parents relied upon other parents to figure out exactly what they needed to do. And so they became huge advocates. We were brought up knowing some very basic things, which is that our brother's quality of life was very much so influenced by policy, whether somebody funded something or charity. And one of them felt a little bit more finite than the other. One of them felt a little too guessy. But because of our story and because of the way that we tell our story, people get a feel, first of all, for the fact that autism is not a childhood disease. I like to tell people that my brother is 47. I think a lot of people think of autism as something you grow out of, and that's something that actually will influence whether they support policies that help adults. I like to tell people that my brother is aphasic. He's nonverbal, but he's a great communicator. That shocks people because a lot of people think that if you aren't verbal, you're not communicating. And it's important that I don't assume that people know what autism is like for each individual. It's different. And then I like to tell them that he's a part of the community. I've actually met with people in government who think that people with developmental disabilities are kind of disappeared from the world. I find that shocking because I've been around people with developmental disabilities my entire life, but they need to understand that my brother goes to parks, he goes to museums, he goes out into the community, he volunteers at churches, he is a part of our world. So when I share that, I'm not politicizing my brother's life, I'm helping these people better understand why he's a part of the community. Crafting your story is like making a really good sandwich. I love sandwiches. I'm a huge fan of them, so I like to make the sandwich analogy. So your ask, this is literally the ask. What do you want the legislator to do? I want you to not cut funding for XYZ, or I want you to vote yes on bill number HB whatever. Whatever you're asking the legislator for is your ask. That's the first piece of bread. You want to start your story with the ask. When you walk in the door, or if you get them on the phone, hi, my name is Pamela Merritt. I live in South St. Louis City, so I'm your constituent, and I'm calling you specifically to talk to you about the budget, and I'm worried about a cut to funding that benefits my brother, who's an adult with autism. The lettuce is how you connect, how you are connecting the issue, how you are connected to the issue, and for how long. So that's where I would share that I am the youngest of 3 siblings. My older brother is 47 years old. He has lived in St. Louis County or St. Louis City his entire life. He grew up going to programs in St. Louis because we have award-winning programs. So Missouri was one of the first states to have programs specifically for people with autism, and we should be proud of that. So I have actually had somebody with autism in my life, my entire life, and I'm connected to this issue because my sister and I care about my brother, but also because we are his legal guardian. The ham, or if you're a vegetarian, more lettuce. The ham is how Easter Seals Midwest services impact your life and or how they impact your loved one's life. I specifically said that because it's important that people who have autism or who have developmental disabilities be given the opportunity to advocate for themselves. My brother will be coming to a lobby day with us. He lobbied for the first time when he was 8 years old. He's done this. He is the best person to talk about his issue and to show how awesome he is and why he's an important part of the community. If you're not comfortable with that, that's a personal decision, but I'm a big fan of it. I think it's really important. Plus, he loves the car ride and he gets McDonald's. The other thing is that I care and love about my brother. I can talk about him endlessly for days and days and days. So I'm certainly not above talking about him in front of a legislator. But when I talk about how Easter Seals Midwest services impact his life, I have to share that my brother has been with this program since he was 7 years old in one form or another. Everything that he has achieved in life, which is far beyond what doctors and experts told my mother when he was born he would achieve, he achieved because of services and therapies provided by some form of Easter Seals Midwest over the last 40 years. I grew up going to the school programs. I entrust my brother to the residential program. I know that he benefits from the community program. And more importantly, the community benefits from him being in the community program. So I can tell them that Easter Seals Midwest services are absolutely necessary for maintaining my brother's quality of life. Without Easter Seals, we would not live in the state of Missouri. Literally could not make this work. The cheese is when you are sharing something funny or tender. You don't want to be totally heavy unless you're a totally heavy person and you just can't be funny. We all have a funny story. So I actually tend to make my brother's first lobby day pretty funny. I'll embellish it a little bit and say that, he was able to get this bill passed because, he basically had a tantrum, which, plenty of legislators have had in hearing room 1, but he had one. But you might want to share a funny memory. I like to tell about how my brother loves to go watch airplanes fly. He loves to go to the Science Museum. And also share the memory that my sister, who learned sign language, was able to have her first argument with my brother when she was like 35. And it was such a heart-wrenching but exciting moment because they were heatedly debating something silly like getting into the van. And I realized, she's signing with him, and he jumped up and started signing back. That was huge. That meant everything to me because my friends have always been able to yell and argue with their brothers, and I never felt like I could do that, but now I can. So that's your cheese. You want to share something. We all have these stories. And then you want to repeat the ask. So no sandwich is good. I mean, I guess an open-faced sandwich. But anyway, the best sandwiches have 2 pieces of bread. You want to repeat your ask. So thank you so much for your time, for listening to me, for hearing my story. And I just want to repeat to you, because it's so important, that I want you to do X, Y, Z with the budget. Any questions?
I do.
Yes.
How long is the perfect amount of time to talk? I mean, you're talking basically at them. They're not asking questions at this point. Are you trying to get them to ask questions, or you're just laying it on them for 3 minutes? And
I'll say it depends on the legislator. Some of them are chatty, and particularly if they have a personal involvement with the issue, they're super chatty. But for the most part, they are going to listen to you. They're really good at nodding, and you don't have their captive attention for as long as you think they do.
Right.
So I like to say, if you're on the phone, it's an elevator speech, and we're going to get to that in a second. If you're face-to-face, you want it to be pretty tight. You're like, I know you're a busy person, so you want to say who you are. You want to build this sandwich pretty much so like that, and then end with the ask. When I end with the ask, I'm going to be specific that I will often say, can I count on you to do the right thing on the budget? I know that you've stood with people with disabilities and adults with disabilities in the past. Can I count on you this time? You want to box them into a corner. They're going to dodge, and they're not going to give you a declarative answer, but you want to try. Because if you get a yes, you want to make sure you hold them to that yes. But you don't have a heck of a lot of time. They are usually, not only might they get called away, they might get called away to vote, If the bell rings, you lost them. But sometimes you have to pull them off the floor if you're actually in the Capitol. You have to pull them off the floor to talk to them. You don't have a lot of time if you do that. So if they're just in there waiting for a vote, you can actually get them off the floor and ask them something, but then you really don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
If you're in their office and you're meeting with them, you still don't have a lot of time.
Got it.
But this is a sandwich that you want to practice over and over again so that you feel comfortable that if you got them on the phone or you met with them face to face, you could say this stuff. Okay, any other questions?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You're gonna finish your presentation.
I can, and then can you
Go
hold the
ahead.
question?
That's
Okay.
fine.
All right, elevator pitch, perfect timing. So the elevator pitch is based on the ability to say something during an elevator ride. I always like to qualify that from floor 1 to floor 10. So that's not a lot of time, but an elevator pitch should be pretty tight. Practice makes perfect. You want to go home with a loved one, with your spouse or your partner. I do this all the time just with the mirror. And you want to practice saying something so that you feel comfortable with it. So this is your life. And I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. It can be emotional. When I talk about my brother, I can get emotional. You want to have a certain level of emotion, but you don't want to break down and cry in front of folks because they're just going to tune it out. It's too much. So you want to practice it, particularly if you have an emotional pitch, so that you have just the right level of emotion, but so you've said it out loud, and after you say it out loud several times, it's not as hard. You want to practice several times, and you want to work through the emotion. And then you want to get it down to 5 minutes or less. Less is better. You may have more time, but again, odds are you won't. So when I talk about that sandwich, you want to build that sandwich in 5 minutes or less. So who you are, where you're from, why you're involved. Is it a loved one? Is it a child? Is it a sibling? Is it you? And then build all those other pieces and make sure you don't leave without the ask. So telling your story and who to share it with and how to share it. I said before, and I'll say it again, share with your network. We are in a critical time, and we need to make sure that funding for the services we rely on is kept. I am a very private person, and it took a lot for me to start sharing my concerns with my friends and family because I didn't want to burden them with the stuff that wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I realized that they burden me all the time with things that wake them up at 3 o'clock in the morning. But that I need them. I need them to understand that there's real life consequences for things that happen in Jefferson City. And right now we are facing some very real threats and concerning consequences. You want to personalize, don't generalize. I have worked really hard not to talk about autism as if I have it. I don't. And not to talk about autism as if I can define it. I can't. All I can do is tell people how I experienced my brother who has autism. You want to personalize and not generalize. We don't want to cast some umbrella that for a rep might be the only thing they've ever heard about a developmental disability, and then all of a sudden they're talking about it all the time as if it's all your story. You want to be polite, passionate, and understanding. Know that politicians aren't experts in much. They learn on the go, seriously. Policy is very different than your everyday life. And they get down to Jefferson City and they get hit with all kinds of stuff on all kinds of issues. And then they get this budget that feels like a game because it's just numbers. And you want to put people into those number slots because the numbers are sometimes the easiest thing for them to move through. But you want to be polite. If you feel angry, step back. And I have a huge anger management problem when it comes to stuff that affects my family. I take a walk. You want to be polite, if they get nasty or flippant or rude, I have a Southern mother, then you get nicer. The nicer you are, the better it is. I have literally had somebody call up and apologize to me because they were rude to me, and I was so nice when they did it. And that started another conversation. That's not my natural positioning, which is to kind of be like, are you crazy? But it does work. Passion is good. Hyper emotion is not good. So if you find yourself getting just too worked up, take a walk. And then you want to follow up. I am a huge fan of following up. You want to be the last person they talk to. You also want to be the one person they don't want to disappoint. You want to be somebody who they don't want to take a phone call from if they've done the wrong thing, and you want them to know what the wrong thing is. So you want to send thank you cards or emails. If you are advocating on behalf of a loved one, include that person in your thank you card or your email. So from Pamela, from my sister Crystal, and from my brother Bill, who I told you about, you know? If you're a constituent, you want to set up a meeting in district, regardless of what they do. I cannot, if you leave this room or you leave that conference room knowing one thing, leave knowing that having that one-on-one relationship is the best investment you can make advocating on behalf of people with disabilities. And you want to thank them and you want to hold them accountable for the final product. The easiest phone call you'll ever make is thank you. I'm the type of person who has a hard time with the not thank yous. But the easiest call you're going to make is thank you so much for doing this. And I just want to let you know we really appreciate your vote. Even if something bad happens, but the person you talked to did the right thing, thank them. Because they might come back and want to do something about it. Because they did the right thing. If they do something wrong, you go back up here. You want to be polite, but you want to be firm. You want to use silence. This is not an often used technique, but hey, this is Pamela Merritt, and I came down and met with you, and I told you the story of my brother, and I was really disappointed when I found out that you voted to cut funding to programs that he needs. Could you just explain to me what you were thinking? And then shut up. And you will listen to somebody fumble into an absolute mess. Yeah, if you filled that space,
They don't have to.
they don't have to. Bingo. You want them to fill that space. You want that follow-up phone call to be uncomfortable for them. It's already uncomfortable for you, because I would much rather thank people. You want them to be uncomfortable. You don't want them to be able to say she was rude, she was nasty, she was hysterical, she was unrealistic. You want them to say, gosh, this woman called me up and followed up, and I didn't have anything to give her. Silence can be the most powerful tool you use in accountability, but you want to be firm. You don't want to let them off the hook, and you want to say, I'm going to continue meeting with you because I think you don't understand the issue. I can't believe that somebody who has stood up and for people with disabilities would make this decision. So I'm going to continue to meet with you, but I am very disappointed. And I hate the fact that I'm gonna have to share with my friends and family that you did this thing. They're thinking vote, still freak out. All right, so that's all I had. Before we phone bank, we have some things to go through, but now's the time for Q&A. So questions, concerns? You had a question, sir.
I have several.
Okay.
But at this point, this seems like it's more of a presentation on how to be a lobbyist rather than those of us who are not going to venture down to Jeff City, but that's just a comment.
Okay.
But at this point in Jeff City, you said that there were some urgent issues. Where is disability given all the stuff that's going on, where is disability in all that? And what should we be concerned about? And who is going to alert us to what we should be concerned about?
Gotcha. It's a great question. So disability is, there's a lot of drama going on in Jefferson City, obviously, but the business of government is going to happen anyway. So regardless of what happens with the governor, they are going to pass a budget, and it's going to impact people with disabilities. The most important piece of policy right now being worked on in Jefferson City is the budget. They are legally mandated to pass it, and the governor is legally mandated to sign it. So whoever's in that office is going to sign a piece of paper. The business of government continues, and that committee is meeting and doing work. So where disability fits is within that budget. The ability to get that funding is within that budget. It's also within committees that might be considering managed care and how to restructure and how to regulate healthcare and also the care that our loved ones get. So all of those things are happening now.
We don't even know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we respond to what we don't know what's going on? I mean, I don't, that there are people preparing a budget, understand that. How that impacts, who lets us know what are issues concerning those who have disabilities?
Got it.
Who lets us know that?
Easter Seals lets you know.
Easter Seals does send out emails. There are times during the session, critical points where, for example, something may be on the horizon for Medicaid. So there's a number of national associations that we deal with people with developmental disabilities. They keep us pretty much up to date, almost to the minute of what's going on. We then send messages, and it's actually some of our communiques, our scripts that tell folks, here's what you should be saying to either Blunt or McCaskill. Here's what's happening at this time. Here's what we need you to say. If that's the direction that you're feeling. I mean, not everybody would have the same concern. So Easter Seals does send out information in what I consider a timely manner to be able to educate, to script, and for the most part, tell folks who are interested in participating, here's what we're asking you to do.
Is that at the state level also, or just the federal level?
Now, at the state level as well.
As well,
It's a little bit different though. Things have to come down from the feds to the state. So there's a little bit of a time delay. So for example, anything with Medicaid. The big issue to begin the year was obviously the health care. So, our president made a point of saying we're going to overturn, repeal, and replace that phrase. And people with disabilities, organizations who support people with disabilities, did a very huge job of writing to their Congress people, saying this is not good for our sons or daughters, brothers or sisters, and we don't want to go in that direction. And luckily, that did not happen. But the battle goes on and on and on. It's not over. Medicaid's going to be a big issue. As Pamela said, while there isn't anything right now dealing with managed care, we as an organization are concerned about where managed care would take us, and don't believe that a managed care system would be good for us. And so we're trying to learn as much as we can about managed care because, to be perfectly candid, we don't know enough about managed care to even suggest what it is, what we need to do to stop that movement.
And to take it even further with Greg is because I ask him all the time, what do I do? I don't know what to do. He's like, we'll let you know, and they do. The last one was the letter that came out from Wendy's desk, or it was a communication in e-blast, or because like you, I'm like, I don't know, is the funding cut, is it not cut? And it informs me, it helps give me that snapshot of what's going on, so that I can pick up the phone and make the phone call.
Yeah, and what,
And
I am not.
yeah,
I've got
I have
those
no
emails,
idea
but
what you're
Steve
talking
has
about.
not.
so we just gotta
Okay.
make sure that you're on that
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
But
You are.
Yes, and I've received those.
But I want to be clear that the presentation that I gave is not what you would do if you were a professional lobbyist. The reason why you want to have conversations is because all of the various issues that come through need to consider people with disabilities. So I know it feels like, gosh, that's another job. It literally is you allowing somebody in elected office to learn about your loved one's life. And that is not ever a waste of time with somebody in elected office, because when they deal with a budget, you want them to think about their constituents. When they're dealing with public safety issues, you want them to think about your constituents. I've lobbied about that. My brother is a 47-year-old Black man who doesn't speak. I'm concerned about him in the public. When you are talking about whether to block grant Medicaid, you want them to think about your loved one. When you're talking about environmental issues, you want them to think about your loved one. So it is never a bad idea for you to go down and introduce yourself and let them know that one of their constituents is a person who has autism or is developmentally disabled.
And if you can't go down there, you call
Phone them.
right?
And so I think we got
Email.
a couple things going on.
Mhm.
One is, how are we getting the message out?
Mhm.
And are we comprehensive enough that we are touching, we're obviously touching some people, but we're not touching everybody.
Mhm.
And we gotta get better at that. So before you leave tonight, if we can get your contact information, we can at least bring you into that conversation. The other thing is, we gotta make sure that we're crystal clear in what that message is when we send it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because as Pamela said, the legislators do not know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And their ability to talk about the different issues. I gotta tell you, we don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at the healthcare conversation and you get a little bit into it and just.
It's horrible.
Totally lost.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's a
But
tough thing.
that can, in and of itself, can be a powerful thing to say. Like, I have called up and said, I have no idea what block granting Medicaid will do. I do know that the state of Missouri, so that means that the federal government will just give a huge sum to the state. I know that the state of Missouri has taken federal money that's supposed to go to feed hungry kids and moved it elsewhere because it was a block grant. But I don't know what it's going to do. And my brother's 47 and I'm his advocate, and I don't deal with I don't know. I don't do that with him. I don't feed him things I don't know. I don't take him places I don't know. So I'm not going to support a policy that is based upon a bunch of theory when this is his life. So that can be a powerful thing to say. You had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to say that, legislators are kind of used to seeing the lobbyists. They kind of know what to expect from them.
Mm-hmm.
But personal stories, they don't get enough.
Yeah.
And they don't want to know, I'm your constituent, I have a kid with autism. They want to know stories about your child.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what your everyday life is like and how it's being affected.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you feel very amateur about it, they want to hear from you anyway.
They do.
And
they're
that
not
really
expecting
does
an
stick in their crawl, because you're the people that are voting for them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to say was that, when you tell your story, when you send them emails or whatever, send them a picture of your youngin'.
Yes.
Or even a short video,
Yes.
5 or 10 seconds, because that makes it real to them what we're living with in our lives.
That is so, so true. And that actually can sometimes take the place if you're not able to go. Just showing that picture or showing on an outing can be huge.
I think we have been advocates for children for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Our daughter is 45.
Mm-hmm.
She's biracial, advocacy there. She's mentally disabled.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been sending letters and stories ad infinitum. I think I might be a little weary of getting all these advocate for gun control, advocate for social justice, advocate for race,
Mhm.
advocate, where do you end and begin? That's
Yeah.
something, I mean, we will advocate for our daughters.
Yeah.
Steve is a big advocate for our daughter,
Mhm.
but you do get weary after a while.
And thank you so much for saying that, because that is, as somebody who works in the business, we're all burned out at this point. I mean, after the whole healthcare thing, I was like, ugh.
Exactly.
But then I'm gonna encourage you, just like I encouraged my sister, we're kind of each other's cheerleader. Be selfish.
I am selfish.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
selfish for my daughter, but I'm also selfish for society.
Yeah,
We need so much.
We do.
Everybody does. There's a lot of underserved people in this world.
it's so true. It's so true. And there's 24 hours in a day, and you have to basically say, what can I do to play my part?
Right.
And I had to just cancel several emails because I was just, the guilt of it all. So I have like, yeah, but I have like 3 top things that I'm very, very passionate about. And then, now that and then that's my job, right? So in my free time, I'm doing this other stuff. But you do have to basically say, I'm advocating for my loved one, for your daughter, and you're getting all of this stuff. And that's unfortunately where we're at, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. There's a lot of chaos right now. And it feels like we're all getting inundated with calls to action. I will say this, that the Missouri budget situation is real. And the other stuff is real too, but ACA felt like a scarier fight, but I also was like, I didn't feel like it was gonna happen, and the Senate stopped it. I'm gonna be very blunt. There's not a lot of stop-gaps right now, other than the fact that people don't like the governor, even in his own party, and aren't gonna do whatever he said to do. We do not have the kind of legislative makeup where I can say, I think the Senate's going to do the right thing. So we do need to weigh in now.
What's the proposal as far as the cuts? You got the facts?
I got a script. Okay. So
What I want to
I want to know how much is being cut. Is it a real threat or a potential threat?
And just to piggyback on that, I'd like to, if we were to contact these people, what are we supposed to ask? What's the question?
you have a script. So we have this for the phone bank. And as he said, like the emails that are going to come out are going to literally tell you what to say. On the back of this is the phone bank script for tonight. And then as far as the budget, it is the threat right now, but the proposal that Governor Greitens made for his budget, which is what we have to really go off of, was a significant cut. I think he was doing, what was the total percentage in Greitens? 20.
Well, he did 3% last year.
Yeah, and then this year.
This year, he didn't recommend any increase, but he didn't recommend a cut
Okay.
this year.
So we're holding firm.
Holding firm.
But so just so you know, that was the budget proposal that the governor sent. And now he is not a popular person. So his party is going to start over. So now, instead of being able to say that there's a flat, we're not sure where they're going to go. So at the very least, what we can say is, I understand that Governor Greitens proposed that there would be no cuts. I would hope that you would agree with that.
And
So-
also to restore the 3% provider cut from last budget.
Yeah.
Do we have a budget for Easter Seals Midwest? I mean, if friends ask me, well, how much is top heavy and what's not? I'm sure it's not top heavy. But because I know that the staff that works with our daughter and they don't make enough. I totally believe that. But above that, I mean, what's going on there? What can I tell them honestly? If I'm going to donate, I always look to see to a charity what percentage is actually being used for charity.
I see what you're saying.
What may help is we have numbers that we can give you, numbers of employees, numbers of people that we support.
Right.
We can give you numbers that fit each of the programs. So, for example, our autism program costs this amount of money. Our community living costs this amount of money. obviously we have that information, that we can give to anybody.
It's also on our website.
Okay.
Transparency, we have a $70 million budget, and round numbers I'll give you is in the fundraising department, which is my department, we are tasked to raise $2.2 million this year, because we can't, that's to fill the gap, right? We get about 67-68%. We've got to come up with the 70.
It's a big deal.
Just to be at that 1%, is it a 1% lean?
Yeah.
So you're right, there is no top
Information
hat.
get out.
It's-
We are such supporters of Easter sales.
And we're
Life
trying
skills
to
and
bring
all that,
more
yeah.
information to, our supporters. And so much of it is on our website.
Yeah.
But if you say, okay, I want to know what's the budget for community living, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And you can't find it, which you should be able to, it's very user-friendly. Sandy, I want to see a fiscal report, or I want to see this.
But that gap is a huge, like, that's a powerful thing to share.
That gap is big.
Yeah.
And the other thing about like the overhead versus how much money is actually spent doing it, the overhead in this type of nonprofit is actually employing people to provide the services. You know, it's a personal, and like it's a one-on-one, it's an investment in that person. So sometimes those kinds of questions can get really nitty-gritty, you know what I mean? Like it can almost undervalue the work that happened.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But just having dealt with my brother's budget and hearing like $2 million, and I think it's safe to say, like, I don't know where they could cut. Like, we already supplement a lot of things for my brother.
Well, and if the 3% cut comes, what is the 3%? How does it affect us? It is extremely alarming.
It
Well,
is.
how alarming is it? The 3% cut. How does that, what do you have, what fewer dollars do you have to work with?
$2 million. $2 million.
No, well,
With Easter Seals Midwest?
how does 3%
Yeah.
affect us?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty hard to add another $2 million onto.
Okay, that's, so
It's
that's
$2 million.
So our executive leadership team and our board of directors say, where are we gonna cut here?
Gotcha.
One of the things is always, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I know it is never, ever, it comes out that it would be staff salaries or jobs. We don't have enough employees as it is, and they don't make enough money as it is. So it is trimming things like our marketing department, our marketing budget, all the way down. And then my travel budget, your travel budget, we get as lean as we possibly can, which is what we have to do in those times of crisis, but we shouldn't have those crises.
Right.
3% cost us about $1.5 million.
Okay, I said
That's
budget,
what I-
yeah.
I'm sorry, you said that.
I said 2.
Yes.
$1.5
$1.5
million.
million too. And then also just what's not being made up in the budget as well. When they are talking about cutting or maintaining, I can speak personally that my brother hasn't gotten an increase in his food allotment ever since I've been a guardian. It's been, I was his guardian in 2004. We have never seen an increase in his food allotment. The ability to give him nutritious food is because Easter Seals works really hard to pool budgets together and do that. But, he doesn't have a lot of money for special things, and he certainly doesn't have the kind of money that can cover the things that we feel are important for his quality of life. So when people say taking 3% from the SNAPS budget, I'm like, he's getting $3 a day. How can you cut that?
Right,
It's unbelievable. So we're at the bone at this point, and there's nothing more to cut, and they're cutting. But those are great questions, so I want to thank both of you. Those are really important. I want to double check and see if anybody on the phone has any questions, or in any of the other offices.
Hello, is this on?
Yeah, I'm on. This is Sarah Marquardt. Can you hear me?
I can.
I just heard someone, and you're talking about the SNAP food budget and everything. I personally know someone who's trying to get people with developmental disabilities supplemental food like WIC. It's going to be a program, if it passes, kind of like WIC, to where we can get the nutritional food without having to spend the SNAP budget. Or like, I know I'm using this as an example only. I know of a consumer right now who she only spends her SNAP budget on like cupcakes and stuff at the gas station. And the individual that I'm speaking of that's trying to fix it has a plan for the nutritional value of SNAP foods, to like for certain foods to be SNAP approved for, yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
thank you so much for sharing that, because I know that that's been a struggle in our family, trying to find fresh vegetables and fresh food. So thank you for that.
yes, and like I said, the person that I know that's working on it with some local people, we're trying to get local farmers and markets like Soulard Market, where you can get fresh vegetables and fruits and stuff, to be part of it too.
That's awesome. I would love to be able to go shopping with my brother at Soulard Farmers Market. Give him a carrot instead of a Kit Kat. Thank you so much. Hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
Yes, so but my point was, there are people that care and that are trying to better it, but I think that the provider core cuts and the cuts that Greiton's made and was trying to make is just horrible, and I can't believe they're trying to cut another 3%, because if it wasn't for Easter seals and the services that I receive, now I'm not going to cry on this call, but if it wasn't for the services that I currently receive, I wouldn't be able to live in my community with my husband, who also has his own disability, and my stepdaughter. So
They're not gonna cut. We're gonna believe they're not gonna cut. They're not looking to cut anything for this year, and hopefully they can adjust it.
Yeah.
So
we're just gonna make some phone calls to make sure that they know that we don't want them to. Thank you so much.
Right.
Were there
You're welcome.
any other questions on the phone or in the other offices? Going once, going twice. Okay.
I have one more question for you, Pamela.
Yes.
How did you you shared a little bit about, going with your parents to advocacy for your brother when you were little and stuff, but can you answer me one question? How do you think it impacted you as a child growing up? How did it cross over into your adult life?
That is a great question. Thank you. So obviously I liked it because I do it professionally, but I would say watching my mother and my father advocate for my brother gave me a tremendous respect for the impact that policy and budgets can have on somebody's life. But it also gave me a tremendous respect for what individuals can do. I mean, I'm here tonight because I want y'all to know that you can be powerful voices as individuals, and I've seen it. And you don't have to be an expert to be a powerful voice. But when I was a child, the idea that if something went wrong and my mother or my father said, well, that happened in the government, the idea that I couldn't pick up the phone and ask why somebody did something was that's just what you did. So I think I grew up believing that part of being in my family was making sure that we did everything we could to ensure that my brother had all of the resources that he needed and that he needs. So when we came back, I was 30 when I became his co-guardian. And our father had passed away, and my mother has dementia. So we are all we've got, and he is a great older brother. So I'm trying to be a great younger sister, but I think I grew up knowing that a part of that for me was going to be doing this kind of advocacy and this work. But it also made me not so scared of it, and I think I don't like to drive 70. That's the scariest, the scariest part about it. I hate the highway, but I feel very comfortable picking up the phone and reaching out, and that's because I saw my mother do it for the first 13 years of my life, and she did a remarkable job. I mean, she's a part of all of this. Mm-hmm.
That so correlates to my life because of my disability. I have cerebral palsy, but my parents adopted my brother with autism, and oh my goodness, I can't do enough for advocacy now because my brother is still in high school, and he's actually going to be joining the Easter Seals summer enrichment job program thing, so I'm really excited for him to do that through the school district. But it's become so much more important to me now that my brother is in my life too, so I totally understand.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exciting. So good luck to him. That's a fun program to be a part of.
Should we call?
Oh,
should we end the webinar and call and then do a celebrate, or should we all call and then come back to the webinar?
I think we should end the webinar because I don't want y'all hanging on. So you should have a script. And at this late hour, you're going to be leaving a voicemail. So you're definitely not going to, I'd be shocked if you're calling and actually find somebody. So you should have a script. We're going to end the webinar at this point, and folks are going to make a phone call to their rep. And then after that, we're going to wrap the stuff up, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. I truly enjoyed this.
Thank you, Pamela.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you.